Imagine looking at the most heavily fortified naval base on the entire western coast of Europe and deciding that the best way to destroy it is to ring the doorbell.
It was March 1942. The British military was staring down a problem that could quite literally lose them the Second World War. That problem was a ship, the German battleship Tirpitz.
The sister ship to the Bismarck, a massive, terrifying monster of a battleship. If that thing got loose in the Atlantic, it would completely shred the supply convoys keeping Britain alive.
Exactly. But a battleship that massive has a major weakness. It needs a very specific, very rare type of parking spot. To do maintenance or repair damage on a ship the size of the Tirpitz, you need a dry dock big enough to hold it. And on the entire Atlantic coast of Europe, there was only one.
The Normandy Dry Dock in Saint-Nazaire, France.
Yes, it was an absolute behemoth of engineering, 300 meters long, 50 meters wide. If the British could destroy that one specific dock, the Tirpitz would never risk leaving the safety of the Norwegian fjords. It would effectively trap the most dangerous ship in the world without firing a single shot at it.
Okay, but you can't just walk up and break a dry dock, especially not this one. The Germans knew exactly how important it was. They turned Saint-Nazaire into a fortress. You're talking about 5,000 heavily armed German troops in the immediate area. You've got 28 massive coastal artillery guns, 43 anti-aircraft batteries, and a flotilla of U-boats and destroyers parked right outside.
The Royal Air Force tried bombing it, but high-altitude bombing in 1942 was incredibly inaccurate. They couldn't hit the dock without flattening the surrounding French town and killing thousands of civilians.
So bombing is out.
And they couldn't send in standard saboteurs. The dock baits were so massive and the pumping machinery was so reinforced that agents couldn't possibly carry enough explosives in their backpacks to make a dent.
So you can't bomb it from the air, you can't sneak in on foot. What does that leave?
It left a plan so incredibly reckless that the German High Command literally didn't think it was possible. Operation Chariot. The British decided they were going to take a ship, pack it full of high explosives, sail it right past the German artillery, and physically ram it into the dock gates.
I want to pause and just appreciate the sheer audacity of this. They are going to take a warship, turn it into a 4.5-ton floating car bomb, and just drive it into the base.
But they didn't use just any ship. They needed something expendable. So they went into the inventory and pulled out the HMS Campbelltown.
This thing was ancient. It was an old American destroyer from World War I that was given to the British. It was falling apart. But for this mission, it was absolutely perfect.
To make this work, the ship had to look German. The engineers completely stripped the Campbelltown. They removed all the heavy guns, they removed the torpedo tubes, they cut the funnels at an angle to mimic the silhouette of a German MOVA-class torpedo boat.
They gave the ship a disguise.
Yes, and then they packed 4.5 tons of hidden explosives deep inside the steel bow. They encased the explosives in concrete so they couldn't be easily found or disarmed. And they wired it all up with an 8-hour chemical pencil fuse.
This wasn't going to blow up on impact. That is the craziest part of the plan. They wanted to ram the dock, let the Germans think they survived the attack, and then detonate it hours later.
Command of this floating bomb was given to a man named Robert Ryder, along with Lieutenant Colonel Charles Newman, who was leading the commandos. On March 26th, the Campbelltown, accompanied by a small fleet of unarmored wooden motor launches carrying the assault teams, set sail from England.
612 men heading straight into the teeth of the German war machine.
The journey over was a nightmare. They had to completely avoid the deep, dredged channel that all normal ships used, because that channel was dialed in by every single German artillery piece on the coast.
So instead, they sailed over the shallow mud flats. They literally scraped the bottom of the ship over the mud just to avoid the heavy guns.
At 19:22 a.m., the German searchlights snapped on. The entire estuary lit up like daylight. The Campbelltown and her wooden escorts were completely exposed.
The Germans start demanding identification, and here is where the absolute sheer nerve of the British comes in. They don't open fire, they don't speed up, they flash a fake signal back in perfect German using stolen Kriegsmarine codes.
The signal translated to proceeding up harbor in accordance with orders, and for just a few minutes it actually worked. The German guns held their fire. The fake funnels and the stolen codes bought them enough time to get right up to the front door.
But you can't bluff forever. When they were just a few miles out, the disguise fell apart. Every single German gun on the shoreline opened up at once.
It was an absolute slaughter. The unarmored wooden motor launches were getting ripped to shreds by 20mm cannon fire. The Campbelltown was taking direct hits to the hull, but the Campbelltown didn't stop. The commander ordered the fake German flag lowered, run up the British white ensign, and slammed the throttles to maximum speed, 19 knots.
Straight at the dock, through a literal wall of flying steel.
At 1:34 a.m., the HMS Campbelltown smashed into the southern gates of the Normandy dry dock.
The impact was so violent that 33 feet of the ship's bow completely crushed against the reinforced steel gate. The ship was hopelessly embedded. It wasn't going anywhere.
The second the ship hit the gate, the commandos poured over the sides. They didn't run for cover. They ran directly into the fortified German positions.
These guys were armed nothing but Thompson submachine guns and sidearms, and they were charging at fortified concrete bunkers holding heavy machine guns.
Their job was to destroy the pumping machinery and the winding houses that controlled the dock, and despite taking horrific casualties, they actually did it. They blew the pumps.
But the extraction plan completely evaporated. Almost all of the small wooden boats that were supposed to pick them up had been sunk or were burning in the water. There was no ride home.
Lieutenant Colonel Newman realized they were trapped. He gathered the surviving commandos and gave them an incredibly grim order. He told them, "We are not surrendering. We will fight our way into the town. We will exhaust all our ammunition, and we will try to walk back to England."
Which meant fighting their way through 5,000 German troops on foot.
Only 5 of those small boats ever made it back to the UK. Out of the 612 men who went in, 169 were killed. 215 were captured after running out of bullets.
It looked like a total German victory. When the sun came up, the base commander reported that the British raid had been crushed. They had stopped the commandos, they had killed or captured the assault teams.
And sitting right there in the middle of it all was the smoking wreck of the Campbelltown, still wedged into the dock gate.
The Germans thought the British had just been stupid. They thought the ship was just a battering ram that got stuck. They had no idea they were looking at the largest time bomb in the world.
By noon on March 28th, the dock was swarming with German personnel. High-ranking officers, engineers, and hundreds of soldiers were literally standing on the deck of the Campbelltown, taking a tour of their shiny new captured prize.
They were laughing at it. They were mocking the primitive British engineering.
And then the 8-hour chemical pencil fuse finally burned through.
4.5 tons of concrete-encased high explosives detonated at once.
The explosion was so massive it completely vaporized the front half of the destroyer. The reinforced steel dock gates were instantly blown off their hinges.
A massive wall of ocean water rushed into the dry dock, sweeping the flaming wreckage of the ship and everything else right along with it.
Over 360 German personnel were killed instantly. Most of them were the officers and engineers who had been standing right on top of the bomb.
The shockwave paralyzed the entire base. The next day, when a delayed torpedo fired during the raid finally exploded against an outer gate, the remaining German garrison completely panicked. They started shooting at their own civilian workers, thinking the British had somehow returned.
But the real damage was strategic. The Normandy dry dock was completely ruined. It was totally unusable, and it wouldn't be repaired until 1948, 3 years after the war ended.
Meaning the Tirpitz was permanently locked out of the Atlantic. The raid actually worked. They completely neutralized the biggest threat to the convoys without dropping a single bomb from an airplane.
Operation Chariot became known as the greatest raid of all. The men involved were awarded 89 individual medals for extreme bravery, including 5 Victoria Crosses, the highest military honor in the British Empire.
It is the ultimate example of pre-commitment. Those men climbed onto a broken-down ship and sailed into a fortress, fully knowing most of them were never coming home. They didn't win through superior technology. They won because they were willing to crash a bomb into the front door of hell and leave it there.